we're going to start with Iran, and I'll tell you, I've talked about this. I watch lots of news all day, broadcast cable, read the internets, look at my inbox, and ladies and gentlemen, we may be on the precipice with a gigantic war with a country that has bedeviled the United States for years. The President of the United States began talking about military force in Iran several weeks ago at a time of massive protests in the streets, and suggested he might use military force if the Iranians didn't scale back their attacks. Well, they cracked down on information by shutting down the internet, and the protests died down, although they seem to be back in some ways. But there was no American military action, and now the president talks about potential military action in the context not of human rights or regime change, but of the Iranian nuclear program, something that every president in the last 5 presidents have had front and center as one of the most dangerous threats, along with North Korea, on the planet. And then sometimes the Israelis talk about the Iranian missile program, and there's the largest military buildup in the Middle East in decades, and yet there's no national debate about this. It's barely discussed on television. Congressman Ocasio-Cortez said over the weekend that this was something that should not be taken lightly. Democrat distrust of President Trump trumps their concern in some cases for the people of Iran, which is to say they're so against anything Donald Trump might do that they don't want to see Donald Trump engage in military action against Iran, because they just don't think Donald Trump knows what he's doing, or they don't trust his instincts. In any event, even if there are no ground troops, no one can tell you. I don't care if you had General Patton or Norman Schwarzkopf. I don't care who you had. No one can tell you what the result would be, what the Iranian reaction would be to a small, medium, or large size attack on Iran by the United States from missiles and bombs. And no one could tell you what would happen if the United States, on purpose or accidentally, decapitated the current leadership. No one could tell you what would happen. There might be massive deaths, massive destruction, and loss of life in Iran in the chaos that would ensue. Nobody knows. So far too blithely is it discussed, well, he'll just do kind of a version of what he did in Venezuela. These are serious topics that should be discussed in a serious way. Today, out of the blue, multiple news organizations all reported the same thing. All of them reported the same thing. The General Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a favorite of the president's, Raisin Kane, he calls him, has a lot of doubts about a military operation against Iran. Strange, they all reported the same thing. Now, this administration, contrary to the first Trump administration, there's not a lot of leaking. There's not a lot of leaking. There's not a lot of substantive leaking, and there's not a lot of personal rivalry leaking. Now, there's some, but there's less than there has been in previous administrations, and certainly less than in Trump 1. So it's a kind of bit turtle on a fence post, actually a series of turtles on a series of fence posts, that a half dozen news organizations within several hours of each other all reported the same thing. And it's somewhat detailed. It's not like, I'll tell you what happens sometimes in journalism. Some news organization will report something, and then other people will pretend they matched it and they'll report it too, because their bosses are breathing down their necks, their editors or their producers, to report the same thing. This is more detailed than that. The specifics of General Kane's areas of alleged skepticism are detailed. Worried about some of the things I laid out. Will there be American casualties because the Iranians respond in force? Does America have enough missile defense and munitions to fight a war of a sustained length? Will there be American casualties? Raising a number of concerns. Now, I will tell you something. You learn this covering Washington, as I once did. The last people in the world who ever want to go to war are people who work in the Pentagon. They build all this stuff, they hire, they train, they never want to go to war. That's just what they're paid to do. They're the opposite of back surgeons. All back surgeons want to do is perform back surgery. People in the military, they never want to go to war, but they will if the commander-in-chief says they want to. So the fact that if it's true that General Kane has some reservations about this, that would be normal. It'd be normal for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs to say, Mr. President, you tell us go kill the Ayatollah, we'll go kill the Ayatollah. But we need to warn you that this could happen, this could happen, this could happen. Now with AI, the war game scenarios, it's crazy how much they can do. But even pre-AI, they game at everything. You know, how How many lug nuts do we have? How many wrenches do we have? How many fighter jets do we have? How many B-52s? How many bombs? How many everything do we have? So that's not a surprise. So here's what the president did moments ago. After reading all these stories that say General Kane's got some real doubts, here's what the president did. He put this on Truth Social. Throw that up. I'm not even going to look up the number because you know which one I mean. Here we go. It's a long post, but I'm probably going to read the whole thing because it's central to what we're talking about. Here it comes. Put that up in the big box so I can read it because that thing is. Here we go. Numerous stories from the fake news media have been circulating stating that General Daniel Kane, sometimes referred to as Raisin, is against us going to war with Iran. The story does not attribute this vast wealth of knowledge to anyone and is 100% incorrect. General Kane, like all of us, would like not to see war, but if a decision is made on going against Iran at a military level, it is his opinion that it will be something easily won. Now already the president's saying stuff he shouldn't be saying, no normal president would say, but he's trying to refute the notion that if he goes to war, it'll be against the advice of General Kane. He knows Iran well in that he was in charge of Midnight Hammer, the attack on the Iranian nuclear development. It is a development no longer, but rather was blown to smithereens by our great B-2 bombers. I always say B-52. B-2 bombers, thank you. Raisin Kane is a great fighter, and he represents the most powerful military anywhere in the world. He has not spoken of not doing Iran, just the way Trump talks, doing Iran, or even the fake limited strikes that I have been reading about. He only knows one thing, how to win, and if he is told to do so, he will be leading the pack. Everything that has been written about a potential war with Iran has been written incorrectly. Parenthetical, the president doesn't read my writing, apparently, because I've been spot on, I say, with as much modesty as I can muster. And purposely so. I'm the one that makes the decision, and I would rather have a deal than not. But if we don't make a deal, it will be a very bad day for the country, meaning Iran, and very sadly, its people, meaning the Iranians, because they are great and wonderful, and something like this should never have happened to them. President Donald J. Trump. Governor, welcome in. And Mr. Mayor, thank you for coming back too. Grateful to see you. Let's start with this media mystery. How is it, Mayor de Blasio, how is it that all these news organizations report this the same day? Does General Kane want this out? Because he wants it to be, he wants to have a little cover his butt if things go bad. Why does that happen?
No, I think it's what you said, Mark, about the Pentagon doesn't want to go to war, honestly.
Yeah.
I've known a lot of senior military folks over the years, and they're very responsible, they're very thoughtful, and they understand the cost better than anyone. So I suspect, even though Hegseth has tried to get rid of some of the more independently minded folks, that at least one senior official has decided this is important to get out there to create some, slow this down a little bit, create some doubt. And that's why this particular leak is different than what we've seen previously. Yeah. This is a big deal. And I think that there's a tremendous sense, I would assume, in the Pentagon, shades of Iraq, that if we go too far down this road, we may end up with a lot of unintended consequences and regret it very deeply.
Yeah. Governor, we'll get to the substance in a moment, but just on this question of all these press reports, do you think the person who's putting this out, whether it's General Kane himself or someone else at the Pentagon, you think they're trying to stop the mission? A potential mission, or you think they're trying to just slow it down and foster debate?
Well, first of all, this always disturbed me about leaks that are unsourced from the media, because the media knows where it's coming from.
Yeah.
And so therefore they know what the agenda is. And that always bothered me, that they can't report who did it, but behind the scenes, they know there's always an agenda with an unsourced leak. And that it really has always irritated me as a person who had a lot of leaks. The other thing is the timing. The State of the Union speech is tomorrow. Maybe there's a concern that there might be some announcement of some action at the State of the Union speech or right before it to make it possibly a diversion, possibly the timing of the announcement to the American people at the same time. So maybe it's paranoid of me to think State of the Union's tomorrow night. Maybe there was some concern that the administration was going to initiate something right before the State of the Union address to change the entire subject when the most recent polls are being announced. Ironically, another thing, Mayor and Mark, is, it's ironic that Dick Cheney's funeral wasn't too long ago.
Yeah.
The neocon that Trump was very critical of, and President Bush. So, you wonder, what are the neocons? Where are the neocons, if there still exist? Is there now one in the administration? The big person who needs to say something is probably our Secretary of State, who's probably the most mature person in the administration, at least from my viewpoint.
Yeah, and he's been kind of just echoed the president. He's not done what, for instance, Bret Stephens did in the New York Times today and lay out methodically what the case is to do this, because it shouldn't be done lightly. It shouldn't be done without a full public debate, which is we're trying to foster.
Yeah, I
here.
don't think there's a Colin Powell around to make the speaking points and then find out later they weren't true.
Yeah, that's a good historical reference. There are 5 key things to understanding Trump. I say them all the time. I won't reveal all 5 unless you hire me to give you a paid speech, but I tease them out. Here's one to always remember about the president. He thinks of his life as a movie. He thinks of himself as the star of the movie, and he loves big cinematic set pieces in public that make him feel like he's the star of a movie. Imagine sitting in the Situation Room, initiating the attacks from the United States on Arab countries, Middle Eastern countries typically begin right around 6 Eastern, 7 Eastern, 8 Eastern. Do the attack, leave the Situation Room, go up to the Capitol, walk into the chamber and say, ladies and gentlemen of the world, moments ago, I just gave the orders, blah, blah, blah. And then gets back in the car after the speech, and he said it's going to be a long speech, so probably 3 hours. And then he goes back to the Situation Room and checks in. And I'm telling you, that'll influence his thinking.
And what are people, the congressional members, were they going to half the room stand up and applause, or they hold up signs, or they dress in certain clothes? This could be a disaster.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in the hockey team and everything else. All right, let's talk about advice to the president. Let's say the president said, I saw you both on Two-Way Tonight. I never miss it. That what Halperin said made no sense to me, but you two seem like you know what you're talking about. Governor, the president asked you first, Governor, what should I be considering? What are the sort of the pros and cons? What are the things I should be factoring in? What would you tell him?
The biggest lesson of foreign policy in my generation was Vietnam. Once you start something, how do you get out of it? It's like I remember starting a project as a mayor. I can't remember what the project was, and my chief of staff said, Governor, if you start that thing, what's the ending point? How do you get out of it? I'll never forget that and had nothing to do with violence, but it was one of those things. Oh, that's a good question. How do you get out of something once you start it? Yeah. And especially if it starts going the wrong way. And with the weapons that we have available now and the other side has available now, if they hit one of our ships or hit one of our planes, this thing could escalate extremely quickly. So the first question I'd have is Marco Rubio, hopefully being the mature one in the room, going, okay, Mr. President, what's the end game here? This isn't just an attack on a nuclear facility. This could be more than that.
Yeah. Mayor de Blasio, what's a good outcome that could be brought about by military action? What's something achievable that you would consider to be a good outcome worth deploying the military to do?
I think there's 2 things that, there should be a broad consensus in this country on. One, the Ayatollahs should not be in power. It's been a horrible repressive regime in addition to what it's done to our national interests. But, and second, they should not have nuclear weapons. So, those are 2 really clear North Stars. The problem is it's not immediate cause and effect that, you push a button, do something militarily, and you get those outcomes. There's a tremendous fear that if the United States attacks, despite all the frustrations the Iranian people legitimately have with that regime, they're very nationalistic too. The Iranian people, the history of Iran, the history of Persia before it, it's easy to push that nationalism button. And if their country comes under attack from a country that for decades people have been told is the bad guy, you could see the exact opposite of what you want and a reinforcement of the regime. Maybe not the Ayatollah himself, but the next generation of leaders.
Yeah.
So what I would say by way of advice to the president, first of all, what we should all be saying is there's a Constitution, there's a Congress. This is not just a single attack. This is potentially full-scale war, must go through the Congress. The War Powers Act requires that. But beyond that, I'd say if you want regime change, doing it frontally is probably not the way to do it. Not only do I agree with the governor entirely, you need the end game, you need to think about all the steps and have all the things we didn't have for Iraq. But more centrally, you probably don't achieve regime change with a frontal attack. And then the second thing I'd say, if you want to constrain the nuclear option, granted, Trump has shown the threats that should bring them to the table and potentially cause compromise. Maybe there's even targeted strikes again on their nuclear facilities. But a full-scale war, exactly as the governor said, as you were pointing to, Mark, there are going to be casualties. There's no question. And the American people are not interested in that. There's a reason it's not front page news. The American people do not relate to foreign wars anymore. They don't want foreign wars anymore.
Governor, if the Israeli and American intelligence said the Ayatollah's in this house, we know exactly where he is. We've got him there. Human intelligence, surveillance, and the Pentagon says they can destroy the house. Would you give that order if you were a commander in chief?
Yeah. You know, those are the toughest calls, but you look back in history from Clinton to Obama to even Trump and Biden, they all made certain attacks. And that line that the mayor was talking about, when do you declare war anymore? I mean, that's the question. And do you notify the committee of, what is it, 8, Mark, or something?
Yeah, gang of 8, yeah.
I don't have an answer for you. I don't know.
Mr. Mayor, if you had that intelligence and the Pentagon said they could take him out, would you take him out?
You and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I would, on a human moral level, I'd love to see him gone. But if you don't know what's going to happen, if you don't know which dominoes are going to fall, look, I think I'd like to believe that between the United States and other countries, we'd have good intelligence about who would take over next.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I asked you again is because he said one of the 2 goals would be that he shouldn't be the leader of the country.
No, but let's clarify it beyond him. I said the regime.
Yeah.
Mark, I don't think this is too reductionist. Most Americans, I think, would agree the repressive regime in Iran should not be in charge of the people of Iran, period. And they should not, as a country, have nuclear weapons. But getting rid of the Ayatollah is not the same thing as getting rid of the regime. Yeah. My fear is not only should an American attack only happen if the Congress were to authorize, but if it happens and it has the reverse impact of rallying the Iranian people, then the next Ayatollah takes over. Yeah. And that person could be better or worse for all we know.
Right. All right. There's no chance in heck the president will go to Congress and ask for a war powers resolution. We know that. And that was true of his predecessors. So presidents are out of the business of seeking declarations of war.
And Democrats also have sinned on that level.
Yes. But let's say he did. Let's say, Pat, you were a senator. You wanted to be one. Say, Bill, you were a congressman. You wanted to be one. Let's say you were the deciding vote for authorizing the war, and the president came to you, called you to the White House and said, I need to pass this. What would you need to hear to be willing to pass a war powers resolution to say, yes, you can go to war against Iran? Governor, you first. What would you need to hear?
I think something Colin Powell realized later on in life is you need to have the strategy, the plan, and the outcome, and the time. And also what Eisenhower had to do with the battle, attacking Normandy. What were the maximum losses that might occur and what were the minimum losses? You got to know that before you commit to something like that. Iran is, what's also interesting is, as the mayor said, it might just totally backfire, not just with Iran, but the entire Middle East. Yeah. And what's interesting, this as opposed to Afghanistan, as I've read and studied, the Afghanistan, you don't have a lot of education there, poverty. The Iranian people are extremely well educated. And it's a whole different dynamic than like in Afghanistan. And we better, it's not where you just go land with a lot of cash and pay people off in the short term.
Right. Mr. Mayor, if the president said to you, look, forget everything else, forget the detailed things Pat's asking for. Senator McCrory wants details. I'm just telling you, they've got a nuclear program and we can take it out. We did great damage to it last time, but we can take it out. That's why we're going to war. Would that be good enough for you to vote for war powers resolution?
No, not go to war. I could hear an argument for a targeted strike in the manner of what they did some months ago. I could hear that at least. That would be something I'd be open to if it came with congressional approval. But if instead it was we were going to have a ground war or we're going to have a prolonged offensive, I couldn't vote for that because I know the unintended consequences would be too great.
Yeah.
The other thing is what you have to mention, Mark, is what is the reaction going to be on back home? Are we going to return back to 1968 or 1972 on the college campuses and protest, or even what we've seen recently in Minnesota? Will people come out in the streets in an organized fashion, not just because of the war, but as a way to maybe even to make the president weaker and to pile on? So you've got to look at domestic issues an awful lot in this decision-making process. You got a midterm coming up too, by the way, where the Republicans already extremely concerned about the midterms. And you've got people like my friend Tom Tillis, who's not running for reelection. He won't be afraid to speak out one way or the other on this issue.
Yeah. Final question on this, at least for now, but the community obviously can come in and ask more. If you were commander in chief, either of you, would the view of the Israeli prime minister and his or her view about the importance of striking Iran, would that sway your thinking at all?
I'll start. Not in the least. I think he has been invalidated so deeply, has caused so much damage to his own country, to the Palestinian people, to the possibilities of peace in the Middle East. I would not take his view into account in the least.
Pat?
I think you would listen to the viewpoint, so you're not blindsided by it. The question is, again, confidentiality and how do you keep the secret? It'd be interesting how far out he goes. Bush had, both to his credit and his detriment, he brought coalitions together, especially in the NATO coalitions.
Yeah.
Here, we're by ourselves.
Yeah.
Totally by ourselves.
Yeah, except for secretly the Israelis. Cozy Earth, ladies and gentlemen, giving you 20% off everything on the site with the promo code two-way. If you don't own a bubble cuddle blanket, it's freezing in my apartment today, and I don't like to turn on the heat. So the whole family just snuggles under the bubble cuddle blanket. It keeps you warmer than any blanket you've ever had. It's soft, it's beautiful, comes in a variety of colors, and it's 20% off, as are everything else on the site. Baja bedding set. First collection set from Cozy Earth that has everything matching. Comes with like 42 things that match. Luxe bath towel set, also available, 20% off. And then, of course, the award-winning pants, all available to you right now. Start your new year off right. Give your home the luxury it deserves. Go to CozyEarth.com. Use the promo code two-way. If you get the post-purchase survey that says how you heard about Cozy Earth, make sure you mention two-way tonight, or me personally. They know me. Refresh your routines with comfort that makes every day feel like a new year. CozyEarth.com, promo code two-way, 20% off.
They say that something that's easy is like a walk in the park. Well, easier than a walk in the park, hit the subscribe button, be part of the two-way community, never miss an episode, be part of our conversations. Thank you for your service to America.
And don't forget, you can now listen to the morning meeting and two-way tonight on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.